how are we going to get this thing rolling down the road? And we invited Jeremy to speak to that tonight. Jeremy Hoffman.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I speak in a lot of different forums and audiences, and every community has a slightly different kind of personality. And what I'm kind of tickled by about this one is you guys are all theater lovers, theater goers, theater producers. So I have a lot of respect, it appears, to be the audience. So you guys are really quiet. It's a little off-putting for me, but I'm sure once we get to the Q&A, things will open up a little bit. I'm actually really excited to be here. I love the theater, I love the performing and visual arts of the city. It's one of the reasons that I moved here, but I also have absolutely no artistic ability whatsoever. I can't dance. I was just at a wedding yesterday. It was a sad, sad scene. My writing skills, I can write you a good term paper, but I'm not a producer of art. So it leaves people like myself, usually doing one of two things: going and being a consumer of art, which I do a lot of. But if you want to go beyond that, I kind of left in the role usually being like a volunteer usher, or this or that. But it's really exciting for me to be here and talking with all of you and providing some of my own kind of professional expertise and knowledge in a way that's connected to an issue that I really care about. I'm not going to go too much into the specifics of the various proposals. I mean, I think we can all speak to that in Q&A afterwards. But I want to talk a little bit about how one engages the political process and how one achieves implementation of their agenda. And everybody has an agenda, and every community in the city has an agenda. So how does that happen? And none of this happens spontaneously. It happens through a lot of hard work and dedication and commitment of a lot of different folks. There's three components, though, when you're dealing with political engagement and really successfully enacting a policy agenda that need to occur. I'm going to touch upon those very, very briefly. And we're kind of pretty far along in a couple of these. First and foremost, people have to get together and think about the issues that affect them. And they usually start with a problem. And in organizing parlance, a problem is something that you want to see change, something that sucks, right? Something that's affecting you, rising rent, this or that. You don't organize around problems. You organize around issues, and issues are solutions to problems. It's very important, but you need to get from the point of the process of confession about the things that are affecting you in your business, your life, whatever that is. You need to go to the next step and start thinking about how do we get resolution or relief on that issue, and that's the issue. And it's really, I'm quite impressed by the work that folks on this panel have put into this, and other folks in the audience, to identify real issues, things that can solve this problem that one can organize around. And that's exciting, that's fantastic. The second piece, and these happen kind of concurrently, is you have to have a base. You have to organize your community. Things do not happen simply because it's a good idea. They happen because you have power. But power comes from being organized, and that's critical. So being in this room is critical. Developing the networks and the infrastructure that the League of Independent Theaters is doing, that David is doing, that Nick is doing, is so important, because people don't just spontaneously make change, right? People are organized, they have to be thoughtful, and your ability as one individual is limited. The collective ability of everybody affected by the issues you've identified is critical. But you need to be organized. You have to have the infrastructure to do that, the mechanisms to communicate internally, the mechanism to turn people out, whether it be phone calls, whether it be hearings. That is so, so important. And you need to be constantly building power. You need to be expanding those networks. So everybody here, it's fantastic. And next time you do this, you need to keep growing, because you need to have momentum. The third piece of this, which I think is kind of what people I was asked to really speak on, is you have those pieces in place, and you have the beginning of your issue, where you've identified some possible mechanisms, some policy mechanism. People have been doing the research, building out, and now folks are building out the infrastructure. Now you have to then engage the decision makers, your targets. Targets you people who can give you what you want. In this case, the city council, at some stage in the process, probably state legislature. Navigating the political dynamics can be difficult, can be challenging. I don't know how to put on a play. It's not my expertise. And the folks who do know how to put on plays engage the arts, because that's what they love to do. They want to put on plays. So all the political stuff usually is secondary. It's something that they get engaged in because as it affects their core issue. what I do is I do political engagement. Uh, there are lots of different political entities in the city, lots of different elected officials. We have a city council of 51 members. We have a mayor. We have a comptroller. We have a public advocate. Those are elected citywide. Navigating that process and those individuals, one needs to be attentive to detail. One needs to understand their self-interest. Why does that elected official, why would they or should they support you and your issue? And you have to keep in touch and keep track of all their internal political dynamics. That in itself is a process, and everybody probably brings to the table a different level of knowledge and understanding of some of the folks who are decision makers, but not all. And so a lot of this knowledge is a collective knowledge. It's about comparing notes and ideas. The other key thing is in any legislative process and legislative engagement, there are windows of opportunity to pass things. Every legislative body, whether it be the city council, the federal government, state government in this country or any other democracy, has different things that dominate their time at different moments. For instance, up in Albany, the legislature up there is very much involved in the budget process. That's happening now. The city council, they're going to be entering their budget process in about a month. I mean, it's kind of started, but it heats up in a couple weeks. So there are different windows of opportunity when you can have the focus of the decision makers and really get them to enact whatever it is that you're trying to do. Now, it is so important to then connect these three components I talked about: base building or organizing, the legislative engagement, and then the research and policy. One, it's to be successful, one has to ensure that these timelines overlap. You have to identify your calendar, the calendar of the legislature, the calendar of what makes sense in one's different community. If you're doing student organizing, you have to be aware of those big winter breaks and this big summer vacation. In other communities, it kind of depends when, whatever the rhythm is of that community you're organizing. And then you need to begin to organize and mobilize. You want to be putting all those opportunities on one calendar, one timeline. You then want to be building out your base so that you are at the maximum ability, if your power, your strength, at the time when there's a peak of opportunity to impact your agenda. And it's so important that these all kind of work in concert. So the base building, the policy and research to the point that that's an ongoing process, and then the legislative engagement. These are, I laid it out kind of as three separate things, but they are all interrelated. One never stops. Because as you're doing the legislative engagement, you're then involved in real substantive conversations and negotiations where you're beginning to further shape and refine your policy proposal. You're not going to get there, though, unless you've organized your base and you've demonstrated power and you keep your base engaged. So those are kind of what I wanted to really focus on, the real mechanics of how you do that. And everybody in this room has a role in that process. And it actually, frankly, cannot happen. Not only can it not happen without the involvement and engagement of the people in this room, and frankly, other folks that you are all going to go out and organize, I would say it should not happen. Because government and our form of democracy is supposed to be responsive to the people. That's what democracy really stands for. Unless the people are demanding action on whatever their agenda is, and are spending the time and the elbow grease to make that happen, and holding their elected officials accountable, there's frankly no reason why they should respond. Because I'll tell you one thing, it's kind of being involved in the city government as long as I have, there are lots of other interests in the city that are also organized and fighting for their agenda. So really the responsibility rests upon those who have the power, and that's the people in this room, and your colleagues and friends and fellow producers of performing arts in this city.
Okay, so now we're going to go right to the Q&A. We're just going to set up a microphone.